Heidi-ho. All right. Greetings out there in YouTube land. This is going to be the Ballad rewrite episode. So every year, or pretty much, when I'm writing, I find an old ballad from the child ballads or any other dusty old tome and rewrite the story for modern times, or I do something slightly different where I'll take a story that people know that doesn't have a ballad and write a ballad about it. Sometimes they take the form of dark tales of the sea, and sometimes they take the form of stories about battles. So this one's going to be 5 of those songs, and this is, let's see, number 9, I think. So next week I'll be playing some Americana with my friend D.T. Hubert, and if you like this concert and you want to see more of them, please hit subscribe if you aren't already. So there's going to be a little bit more talking today because I do want to go over the history of the songs when I'm playing them. And also there's a whole lot of lyrics today, like way more lyrics than usual, so I will be cheating. I'm going to start off with a song called Two Crows, and this is a rewrite of the ballad Twa Corbies, which it's sort of a cross between a real folk song and a literary folk song, where there was a published version in a book in the 1800s, which is the lyrics most people know. So I kind of transported it to at the time I transported it to the Great Depression, but I have a pretty good friend in Portland who likes to say that I transported it to the Great Recession in the 2010s, but a lot of the same kind of predatory stuff going on. So this is a couple of people on the side of the road talking about someone that they're going to rob. Sat beneath a crown of olive trees. One said to the other, you know, this hunger's a disease. Easier to eat the wind than to try and make a wage. It rattles my bones and blows right through my cage. Well, shadows are marching black across the fields and leaves. One said go west, but the other said it lies east. Alright, the second said, maybe we'll take the one you like least. I swear sometimes you can be so hard to please. One said to the other, I think I saw a man fall into the chase. Happens all the time these days, it don't seem so out of place. The second said this bird might be worth 2 in the hand, but the one I let slip by is worth more than I can stand. First said I can't be the only one who's never killed a man. I swear there was a dog with him, but it must have up and ran. His first said I bet his wife will wonder where he's at. The second said I bet she's the one who took his hat. Well, that dog must have gotten back to his house by now. I can tell you right now, this is more time than I'll allow. You take his eyes, I'll take the part that's in between. There's a phone across the road and you find me so obscene. Well, I thought we swore to each other we wouldn't do this anymore. The second said I bet he was just another child of a whore. You can wait here all night if you're waiting for absolution to arrive. You can't send me to hell just for trying to survive. You can't send me to hell just for trying to survive. All right, let's grab one of the acoustics, and this next one's a true rewrite of one of the King Arthur stories, and there was actually a ballad about this, and there's a lot of different versions of it. It goes by various things referring to the ugly woman character in it. So there's the general gist of the story, and it's a lot of words, and there aren't going to be words that you can't understand in it. But the general gist of the story is that Sir Gawain and King Arthur have to answer a riddle for an enchanted knight, or the knight's going to cut off King Arthur's head. And the original ballad is called Marriage of Sir Gawain, and that's the same title I kept. But Gawain helps King Arthur answer the riddle, but in return he has to marry this incredibly ugly-looking woman that they meet who gives them the answer to the riddle. And in every version of the story, she's actually a beautiful woman who's been enchanted, so Gawain doesn't have to be married to someone who he doesn't like the look of, which, you know, it kind of is what it is. But one of the nice things about the story is that it's actually about honoring your partner's wishes, and which does kind of make it a little sweeter than it could be if you were just writing a story about making someone pretty again. Early Christmas morning, King Arthur and his men rode north from Carlisle Castle, a-hunting in the glen. And Arthur spied a white stag leap into the wood, and spurred his horse after it as quickly as he could. He followed close behind the stag and heaved his hunting spear. But as he was dismounting, the stag changed how it appeared. No prize steer lay before him, but instead there stood a knight who wrestled Arthur to the ground with a foot upon his throat. The enchanted knight told the king, "Prepare to meet your end, for your hunting parties trespassed this morning on my land." But Arthur said, "Answer but one thing. What is it above all else that women want from men? Answer this and I'll spare your life, or else take it if I can." returned to Carlisle, dejected and afraid, and the king asked among his knights for sympathy and aid. And his nephew Gawain said, although he did not know the key, he said, I'll find it or else I'll lay down my life in place of thee. So Gawain and the king rode for a year without a rest, and gathered many answers, though they couldn't pick the best, until they came to the forest where he'd promised to return, and met an old and ugly woman standing in the road. Her face was torn and twisted, and her body bent awry, and she surely was the foulest woman the knights had ever spied. I know why you're here, she said, and killed you'll surely be, but if you give me what I ask, I'll tell the riddle's key. And Arthur offered all his gold and lands and power too, but she shook her head and said there's only one thing he could do. One of your knights must marry me, and that's my only price. And Gawain said he'd volunteer if she saved King Arthur's life. Women want to have their will is the answer you should give, which Arthur then delivered in the hopes that he might live. 'Twas my sister told you this, the enchanted knight said, but a vow's a vow, and I for one won't go back on my word. Then Gawain too, he kept his vow, and on his wedding night she came transformed into a lovely sight. Would you prefer I stay like this by night or else by day? And Gawain said he'd prefer by night, but that she would rather day. And when you go about in sunlight, what would you do with me? Would you rather I stay at home and hide in misery? And Gawain thought and said it best that she should have her say. And she said, bless you, Gawain, now this is how I'll stay. When I was young, my mother did enchant me with a spell, to appear as you first saw me, like a creature pulled from hell. But now the curse is lifted, and I'm once again myself, since you valued my content or having your own will. All right. That's not the only riddles we'll have today. I'll have another one that's actually about the riddle game a little later, which is a slightly different tradition. Some of you might be familiar with it from Tolkien. But right now, I'm going to do a song about King Henry's victory at Agincourt, and I could not believe there was actually no English ballad about this. It seems like it ought to be a pretty obvious thing for somebody in England to write a ballad about, but all we have is a Shakespeare play, which I suppose is a pretty good thing, but it takes a lot longer to recite a play than a song. So this uses a lot of the historical events. The play, while it does take some liberties, does contain the general outline of what actually happened at the battle, and he didn't really need to exaggerate that much. It really was a spectacular victory for the British. They were vastly outnumbered, and except that they had the technology of longbows, the French were also pretty well better armed in a fair fight and had a lot of cavalry. But they got bogged down in the mud, as many people know, and the longbows carried the day. So this is King Henry's battle, the Battle of Agincourt. King Henry was an honest king, in Monmouth he was born. He demanded of the French they pay a price for all their scorn. He asked the hand of Catherine and all the gold in store. They refused him when he asked the crown King Charlie wore. King Henry was a righteous but a proud and noble lord. So in 1415 spring, King Henry went to war. He lay in siege a month and day at Hafler by the sea, and to his men who feared to die cried once more to the breach. He delivered a challenge to the Duke of Aquitaine, but to fight King Henry face to face, the Dauphin would not agree. Though the year and days grew short, he marched his armies north to Calais and then to ford the Somme and last to Agincourt. In the dark before the battle joined, he walked amongst his men, and to his brave though sickened band cried. And Henry said their cause was just, and said he would not yield, and if any man had no heart to fight, he was not upon that field. And Henry led himself the main Camoys left-hand force, and the Duke of York the vanguard took on the field of Agincourt. Men-at-arms came through the mud in heavy morning rain, and the bowmen and the king's own sword beat them back again. And the cowards attacking from the rear, they slew the baggage train, and Henry ordered in return his prisoners should be slain. But when the day came to a close, the histories to record, King Henry won the victory on the field of Agincourt. When the day came to a close, the histories to record, King Henry won the victory on the field of Agincourt. All right, let's do the riddle song now. This one's going to be quite different from the other ones. The other ones, I'm staying kind of in the British tradition, or at least of the British Isles. So this one, if you've read The Hobbit or seen the movies, of course. Bilbo and Gollum fight a riddle battle. It's called in the chapter called Riddles in the Dark, and the tradition of having this sort of battle of words where one person asks a riddle and the other person has to answer it in turn. It goes back very, very far and is captured in a lot of songs. One of which is called Riddles Wisely Expounded, and I've actually taken some elements from this one multiple times, not just for the riddles song that I'm about to play, but for a song on 2011's Midway Fair album, The Distance of the Moon at Daybreak. I used some of the elements from it for a song called Edward Kane, and one of the other ballads in this tradition is called The Elfin Knight, and the general gist is that two people meet on the road. One of them asks the other one riddles, and then there's either some sort of punishment or some sort of reward for answering them wrongly or correctly, respectively. So, so this one, I took it and I transported it to somewhere in some mythical form of America during the westward expansion, and it stars a railroad worker and someone that he meets along the way. I was also reading a lot of fairy tales at the time, so I rolled in some traditions from fairy tales where you have three things. One sec. Hopefully that's better. Just making a little bit of noise. My friend Rick Vader played the banjo on the original recording, so I'm gonna do my best here. I like how it sounds on the banjo, but not one of my primary instruments. Looks the same as a guitar, but you'd think it wouldn't be so different. Traveling man in his boots and jeans came walking down on the railroad beams, and standing there in the mountain stream was fairest girl he'd ever seen. Her dress was white, tied to her side. She washed her feet in the river's tide. He stepped aboard with a clear mind and said, "My dear, will you be mine? Sorrow's old and love is new, but summer will be coming soon." Many men from south and north, mighty few could prove their worth. But if you prove keen and you prove wise, then you may lie with me tonight. Or runs its course but never sleeps, and what has roots profoundly deep. What can heal but also harm, and prick you worse than any thorn? Sorrow's old, love is new, summer will be coming soon. River runs but never sleeps, the mountain's roots profoundly deep. And many say pain heals in time, but love could answer every line. She said, "You've answered well and true, so I will go along with you." They say strength and beauty fade, but a clever mind lasts all your days. Sorrow's old and love is new, but summer will be like to leave a little bit in the middle there for people to think about the answers to the lines. All right. So for the last song, it's gonna be a song that is based on, it's sort of an epic, sort of a legend, sort of a cycle of ballads. Occasionally a very, very tremendously long ballad, and sometimes a very short one. And my version is going to be a very short one. So this is going to be based on the legend of Hind Horn. And Hind Horn is a story about often he's a king, but some sort of nobleman or knight, and he falls in love with a princess, and they exchange a couple of gifts. In some versions, he gives her a scepter. In some versions, he gives her some piece of jewelry. And usually she's the one who gives him a ring. And the way the story works out is that he goes off for many, many years, like so long that they no longer recognize each other when he comes back. And in many times he's fallen on very hard times. Like a lot of times he comes back as a beggar. Sometimes he's just disguised as a beggar, but usually he's unrecognizable when he comes home. And the test is that she recognizes the ring, and they go back to being in love as you do. So I read this story and I thought it was a little depressing that generally she's just sitting around waiting for him to come back, which seems like, doesn't make for a very good story. Although I realize the story is titled Hind Horn, so you're gonna tell the story of the dude who's in the title. But let's face it, women characters generally get the short end of the stick in ballads of all sorts, not just the murder ballads, but just as characters. But I really wanted to focus kind of on, I don't know, the kind of emotional impact I had when I just thought about how kind of sad that is that she sits around waiting for him to come back, and I transported it to the United States in a small town in rural America in the late 80s and 90s, and this is just about the time when people who were, I'm a little younger than the generation, but it also affected my generation, where people generally tell you that you're really not going to make much of your life if you stick around in a small town. And I realize that's been true for an awful lot of human history, but it kind of took the form of people needing to go get a college degree to really make something of their lives, and also to just kind of add to the depressing nature of the woman character. She doesn't get into college, and he does, and he goes off, and so the story's slow enough that I'm sure you'll catch all the words, but the ending of the story traditionally is that he comes back, they recognize each other, and she's about to get married, and he stops the wedding, and they run off together. And I thought that was a very unrealistic ending for modern life. So. So many instruments need the capo. So this is called David and Jane. And this was the last song I wrote for February album writing month 2014, which is right around the corner. If you're a songwriter, please join us. David's father was a silversmith. Jane, the granddaughter of the mayor. He makes her laugh, but it's easy with her. Compared to anyone, no, she was fair. On weekends they'd sit on the roof at home, or drive down to the quarry, finish some beers and skip stones on the water, and make up their wild adventure story. In June he got a scholarship letter, but Janie's grades just weren't good enough. She said, I guess now I can't expect too much better than to keep my looks and be someone's wife. So he said, I can't help what she's going through. So he made her a locket and a necklace. He said, this won't be the last time I see you, my dear, but distance won't make me love you any less. So after he finished his degree, he got a good job in Cincinnati, and didn't so much forget her as was busy, till a friend called to say she would marry. So David packed a bag for the weekend, left first thing early in the morning. He stood on her threshold, a ring in her hand, on her wedding day without a warning. He said, I've had this since when we were kids, and there's no one I'd give it to instead. And though the bridegroom thought that he'd wedded the bride, it was David that took her to bed. Thanks for watching, folks. As I said earlier in the program, next week I will have D.T. Huber, and we're going to play some Americana together. I had the honor of playing on one of D.T.'s EPs several years ago, and for a very brief time I filled in on mandolin. So I know quite a bit of his music, and he's a very good songwriter and very underrated as